Louise and Nuala from the Department of Communities. So very welcome to this committee, and please deliver your presentation now, and then we'll take questions from members.
Chair, I'm struggling to get my
I'm
camera
not sure what
on.
order you're planning to do this in, or is one person delivering it?
Chair, I don't know if you can hear me. It's me, Walls here. I'm struggling to get my camera on. So if you can bear with me a moment, it was working.
Right. They were on screen there. So there's
There we go.
We can't hear.
Maeve, can you hear us?
I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
You can.
Right.
Maeve
I'm
is
getting
logged in
lots of
twice.
echo.
Yeah, Maeve is logged in twice, but there's one of the
There are
logins.
some technical issues here. We'll see if we can get it sorted out.
Will I put something on?
Thank you.
Same as Mo.
Shall I come out and come back in again?
You bear with us, Maeve. We'll see if we can get something sorted out just now.
They can hear us.
Chair, are you able to hear me?
If just can we try again there and see if you can hear us and
Yeah,
hear you?
I can hear you now. I'm hearing feedback at my end. So lots of echo on the line. I'm wondering, should I log out and log back in again?
Chair, I'm looking at screen here. Maeve is logged in twice.
And there's no, yeah,
Maybe from a separate device.
Apologies again for this, folks. It's just
there's
part
no,
of
yeah,
difficulties of having a hybrid system here.
there's no
Sometimes it
apparent
doesn't work.
reason for it at my end. So I'm going to log out and log in again. Apologies, Chair. Chair, is that better? Chair, are you able to hear me now?
Can you try again there just to see if?
Yeah, I can hear. That's much better.
She's not on mute or anything, so.
No.
That's much better. I can hear you.
Okay, the situation seems to be resolved now, so maybe if you want to go ahead, apologies about all that, but we'll hear from you now.
Chair, good afternoon, and my apologies in the first instance. Can I thank you for the invitation to meet with you today, and again repeat apologies that we had communicated ahead of your meeting last month. I wrote to the committee clerk at that time to explain that I had COVID and that John Ball, head of arts in my team, had suffered the bereavement of a close relative, and John is represented today by his deputy, Louise Hyland. And in the time available, I'd like to cover a number of areas, and I'm of course very happy to pick up on any questions that you might have. I appreciate that in some instances I'm going to be touching on some important matters that are still at relatively early stage. And if it would be helpful to the committee, Louise and I are more than happy to arrange to come back at a future point and provide further updates at any time. Indeed, we would welcome that opportunity. Can I first of all, Chair, let me acknowledge great strides which this council has made over the last 10 years, following Derry Londonderry's notable accolade of becoming the UK's first city of culture back in 2013. That was an incredible time for the city, which saw £150 million of public and private investment, as well as £12.5 million of support at the time from DCAL for cultural programming alone, and a time that saw record attendances. It's fair to say, I think, that then and since, both in word and in deed, the Council has embraced the importance and value of cultural investment and the social and economic returns that flow from that investment. In so doing, you've made choices that I suspect haven't always been easy, and I've no doubt that you have prioritised over many competing demands. As you prepare to mark the 10th anniversary of City of Culture and prepare once again to boldly and creatively showcase the city and its surrounding area, we all look forward to the outcome. And whether it's Our Place in Space, led by the Nerve Centre, or the Wall City Passion, or the Jazz Festival, and much, much more beside, the creative talent and the professionalism of arts organisations and multiple freelancers and the willingness of thousands of volunteers is profoundly admirable, and it's widely regarded. If I might touch, Chair, for a moment then, on the relationship that we in the Department's Culture Division enjoy and benefit from with officers of the Council, and I think particularly here with Aileen and with John, for whom we have the deepest regard, and we readily acknowledge the extent of their knowledge and the depth of their passion. Both of them are fierce advocates for the creative output across the whole of the council area and of the contribution it makes to wider social and economic life. And the crucially important matters, which I know you will want to speak to me about today, of the adequacy and of the equity of funding or distribution, is something that we know from Aileen and John and from organisations in the sector, and indeed from Assembly questions, is so very important, and I'll return to that point later. If I might take a moment and just briefly mention, though perhaps for many of you it's already well known, the Department for Communities, where Louise and I work. It's the largest department. It's got an excess of 8,000 staff working there, and its reach extends from social security to housing, regeneration, support for local government, heritage, public record, social inclusion, voluntary community sector, charities regulation, sports, arts and languages. And that contrasts with the days when there was a dedicated department for culture, arts and leisure. The Culture Division, for which I have responsibility, is charged with policy and programming in arts, languages, Irish language, Ulster Scots and Sign Language, and with policy and oversight responsibility for libraries, museums, Armagh Observatory and Planetarium, and for policy on architecture. In discharging such a broad portfolio, the department relies heavily on our arm's length bodies. And in the case of Culture Division, those are the Arts Council, National Museums Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland Museums Council, Libraries NI, Forest na Gaeilge and the Ulster Scots agencies. And to mention that the division sits in the department within part of a wider engaged community group led by Moira Doherty that includes heritage, public records, sports, capital infrastructure and the wandering community sector. The department's vision is of working together for a fair and inclusive society by transforming support for people, communities and places, improve lives and deliver generational change. Under the theme of well-being and inclusion, the department is committed to helping everyone live positive, fulfilled lives surrounded by diverse opportunities. And one of the priorities under the theme is to support community confidence, participation and well-being through direction and support to the creative industries, museums, libraries, sports, arts, culture and heritage. The department is committed to being innovative in our methods of stakeholder engagement, to co-design and to co-deliver, to streamline, to simplify and to modernise. The department's strategy calls on staff to enhance and improve how we are working, to work collaboratively and in a joined up way. It calls on us to target expenditure where it will have most impact and to deliver on agreed outcomes effectively and to prioritise our work. We as officials know that whatever collaborative work we were doing before COVID has really intensified through the pandemic. And we've worked with countless numbers of individuals and organisations in the arts and creative sector and well beyond to get support to where it was most needed. Our baseline resource funding share for the arts branch in 21-22 was 12.4 million, of which the greatest majority, 10.2 million, was allocated to the Arts Council for distribution. Aside from the Arts Council allocation, 370,000 was allocated to councils for the Community Festivals Fund and 1.82 million to Northern Ireland Screen for recurrent work within the creative industries. For example, pipeline work through creative learning centres that included the Nerve Centre in Derry, Londonderry. For capital funding, rather than having a set baseline at the beginning of the year by way of allocation for arts, bids are made within the department to secure funding for specific programmes and interventions in year, and in 21-22, 1.6 million was secured for the Arts Council to deliver a range of capital programmes and small projects. And the lion's share of that went towards delivering support to organisations requiring health and safety updates to buildings or equipment. It's fair to say, Chair, that baseline funding levels have remained fairly static over recent years. It's also true to say that each year we bid for in-year reallocations, and whilst there's never any guarantee, it has allowed budgets to be increased. For example, 1920, the resource allocation increased by over 10%. And it's also fair to say that we're well aware of the strength of feeling in the arts sector, that one-year budgets provide little stability and they get in the way of planning. The Minister herself had indicated that she's open in principle to multi-year funding, but we are still restricted in that we can only allocate funding for the financial year in which it's allocated. As in the previous year, Chair, the 21-22 year wasn't typical, in that it was augmented by special non-recurrent COVID recovery funding of some 5 million, part of a wider package that the Minister secured. That wider package being 13 million for culture, arts and heritage through the executive in recognition of the deep and profound COVID impact on the sector. In recent weeks, we have confirmed a contingency budget of for 2022-23, the Arts Council of 10.3 million, a slight increase from the previous year. Chair, if I might turn briefly to the Arts Council functions as set out in legislation. Essentially, there are four. Firstly, to develop and improve the knowledge, appreciation and practice of the arts. Secondly, to increase public access to and participation in the arts. Thirdly, to advise the department, other government departments, district councils and other bodies on matters relating to the arts. And finally, any such other functions as are conferred by any other statutory provision. The legislation establishing the Arts Council further provides that it shall be the duty of the Arts Council to consult regularly with district councils on the exercise by the council of its functions, and the council in addition shall make provision for regular consultation on the development of the arts. And I'm interested when it comes to questions or observations on any observations that the committee may wish to make in that regard. In turn, the department may make grants to the Arts Council and may attach such conditions as it thinks appropriate for securing the proper management and control of functions. An example of this was during the co-design of the emergency funding schemes. The department shall not exercise these powers with the intention of interfering with the exercise of the Arts Council's artistic judgment in deciding whether to provide financial assistance. Chair, I know that Roisin McDonough, CEO of the Arts Council, presented to the Northwest delegation from the co-delivery group in May 2021, at which time she provided in great detail account of the grant-making activities, and specifically those that were Belfast-based against other council areas and those outside, and where the programming of activities headquartered in Belfast, Derry, Londonderry and Strabane were taking place. She provided detail at that time of the organisations within the council area that the Arts Council funds. I'm aware that in broad terms, the point that the Arts Council makes is that both numerically and by monetary value, the allocation to organisations and individuals in the Derry and Strabane council area is broadly reflective of the percentage of the population residing in the area. I know that despite her assurances, your concerns over the equity of funding have not entirely been satisfied. I suspect that Roisin also would have mentioned, as the Arts Council bring to the department's attention, the per capita allocation for the arts in Northern Ireland, and she would have drawn comparisons with the south of Ireland and with Wales, arguing the need for levelling up. And on that point, I would say that the department acknowledges that funding for the arts is lower than we would wish to see, and we seek earnestly to secure additional resource through whatever mechanisms that we can, but we are realistic in recognising that there are many competing priorities, and particularly through COVID, and Louise will come to that in a moment. Very great effort was made to anchor and secure organisations in the sector most impacted by the pandemic. Since Roisin McDonough met with the group, the Minister had considered and approved the Arts Council business plan for 22-23. The plan contains reference to the Rural Deliberative Forum having been established and to Minority Ethnic Deliberative Forum also having been established. And importantly also acknowledged the work that with this council on the Creative Resilience Programme. The collaborative initiative behind that is aimed at making organisations more effective and efficient, improving their resilience and their investment readiness, and that work continues into this year. And it is indeed groundbreaking work. It's also worth mentioning that the Arts Council has a strong and relatively new board working under the leadership of Liam Hannaway, himself having been steeped in local government in his professional life. And Liam makes no secret of the importance that he sees attaching to community arts and to access in rural areas. The department welcomes the emphasis. Roisin may have mentioned during her presentation at that time that the department had or was about to launch a task force under the Minister's direction. And I'm going to ask Louise Hyland if she might say something briefly about the task force, she having been the key point of contact between the task force led by Dame Rotha Johnson and the department. And I've also asked if Louise might touch briefly on the additional funds secured by the department to assist artists and art organisations in the course of the pandemic. The intention was always there to use the work of the task force to transition to a longer term strategy for arts and creativity. I can share progress on that front shortly. Louise.
Yes, and thank you to all for having us today. So over the course of the pandemic and responding to what was a crisis for so many, and in particular for art organisations and creative individuals, Minister Hargey, with the support of other executive ministers, secured an additional 46 million of culture, arts and heritage funding. This was an unprecedented increase to budgets to meet the challenges of which the pandemic had presented. The programmes delivered were co-designed with organisations in the sector, and as you well can imagine, there was lots of conversations across a lot of stakeholders, which presented a lot of challenge. Funding was channeled through delivery partners such as Arts Council, NI Screen, Ulster University, Lottery Heritage, Ulster Scott Agency and Keisha. Given the circumstances, programme design and delivery was and had to be made at pace. The aim in the face of the anticipated devastation with box office closures was to secure a balanced infrastructure geographically and thinking about artistic genres. Full programme evaluation has yet to take place, but indications at this point are very positive, and we're aware of a number of organisations from the Northwest having availed of this funding. And without many of which would not have survived the devastation of the pandemic. In parallel to this, Minister Hargey put together a task force chaired by Rotha Johnson with experience from a membership ranging from music, performing arts, festivals, heritage, and that's just to name a few. We were indeed extremely fortunate to have Martin Bradley and James Kerr as part of that group, in addition, of course, to a representative from local government. The purpose of that group was to firstly consider measures to support reopening and recovery in the short term. Secondly, the task force was asked to identify medium to long-term actions which might be considered in the development of a new culture, arts and heritage strategy. The task force report was published in November 21, with Minister Hargey accepting all of its recommendations. Maeve has already mentioned the emergency funding administered over the course of the last 2 years, and it was from the task force report that individuals and organisations were again prioritised using 21-22 COPA funds. In addition to this funding envelope, a further 21.3 million was secured in support of recommendation 4 of the report, which was in relation to talent acquisition, retention and development, and which saw the launch of the Skills and Employability Scheme just at the beginning of 2022. And Maeve, that brings us on to strategy.
And just picking up from where Louise left off, Chair and members, the work of the task force, like I say, bridging towards a longer term strategy, and the department is now moving to develop that strategy in earnest over the course of this year and into the early part of next. An individual with experience of working with and in the creative industries has been identified to lead the work, and he begins that task next week. And the ask of that work, which will be carried out in a highly collaborative way at the Minister's request, it will be to shape a vision and to deliver a strategy to support recovery, to amplify the impact of the arts, to strengthen collaboration and coordination across central and local government and with the wider public sector, business, education and community sectors, and to elevate awareness using the direct contribution that culture, arts and heritage makes. So it's really important as that work unfolds that connections are made and alignment is achieved with other pieces of work around the mental health strategy, the 10X strategy for the economy, work on good relations. I think, you know, although it's early stages, the development of this strategy holds out, I think, the prospect of a number of opportunities to be realised. The first, and I think really importantly, is to widen the lens through which the arts is viewed and valued. As the lead minister, the Communities Minister, of course, has particular responsibility, but ownership for the health and vitality of our arts sector and the nurturing of creativity needs to be much wider. It's not for one department alone. The pandemic taught us that the arts aren't just a powerful antidote to isolation and loneliness, but a really significant means of self-fulfillment and of giving pleasure to others. The World Health Organization research has shown through multiple studies, hundreds of studies, that the use of artistic media in health can have lasting benefits for health outcomes. The arts can affect the social determinants of health, support child development, encourage health promoting behaviours, help prevent health issues, and support caregiving. It can also reduce stress, which helps prevent or slow the progression of a range of conditions, including cardiovascular diseases. And their ability to provide cognitive stimulation is effective in the treatment of dementia and other conditions associated with the treatment of depression and anxiety. These are not my conclusions, these are conclusions of research by the World Health Organization, who found that they can be used to communicate valuable messages across cultures and political divides and provide ways for affected populations to process and learn from traumatic events. And you, Chair, know only too well in the Council, from bed occupancy figures and other measures linked to tourism, the impact that boldness around arts and creativity can bring for visitor numbers and bed occupancy. Chair, your general well-being responsibilities in the Council, and the experience that the Council has in bringing others to the table for community planning, the influence that you bring to bear has such great potential to further understand and amplify many promising developments in the arts that might seem somewhat patchy at the moment, whether in social prescribing and in other areas. And I think we have much to learn from the leadership that local government is showing in that regard. I think there's a second opportunity as well to look again at the equity of funding, and I mentioned that earlier, aligned to wider departmental interests, to look especially at support for and access to the arts, especially in disadvantaged areas, for arts organisations, for individual artists. The task force concluded that there's a number of demographic and geographic challenges and opportunities for the strategy to examine. It should take an evidence-based approach to consider whether there may be systemic inequalities in the distribution of funding for the arts. For example, affecting rural communities or people with disabilities, Indigenous language, culture communities, Irish and Ulster Scots, and Black and minority ethnic communities. If there are found to be inequalities or barriers to equality of access, the task force recommended that the strategy should seek to identify means to prevent, address or overcome these. The strategy should also consider the impact of an ageing population on the workforce and on visitor and audience numbers. The strategy brings opportunities to look at one of the important points raised with us also, and that's of more flexible funding, and in particular multi-year funding, and to look at how best we might leverage in other sources of income. There can be no doubt, as I mentioned earlier, that we're constrained by annual budgets. I think the strategy, again at this early stage, holds the promise of being able to help us to understand and look in a more systematic way at career pathways for various industries. And the Minister launched a relatively short time ago the Employability and Skills Programme, which is placing a significant number of new entrants into the sector. And I think that there's work that can be done to build on that and to strengthen the connections between central, local government, the arts sector and arts organisations themselves. And like I say, Minister Hargey has made quite explicit her expectation that it's to be co-produced in the same way as the social inclusion strategies and language strategies are being. And since I'm with you this afternoon, I want to mention the invaluable input that Professor Malachy O'Neill from Ulster University made to the panel of experts report on the Irish language that was published a short number of weeks ago, and the ongoing contribution being made by Brian Doherty of the Northwest Cultural Partnership, who is my co-chair of the Ulster Scots Strategy Co-Design Group, and to James Key of the Brady and District Ulster Scots Association, a member of the same group. Of course, Chair, the strategy is going to have to look at affordability, and we know that that will be challenging. We know that organisations and individuals in the sector have experienced and continue to experience loss of income combined with rising prices in fuels and insurance. Chair, in closing, we know from our direct engagement and from the all-party working group presentation which Aidan made about the sheer scale of your ambition in the Council to build on past successes and make bold and imaginative future plans that include City Deal and inclusive future programmes. We in the department are committed to working with you and others to co-produce an overdue culture strategy and to support you however best we can as you progress your ambitious agenda. Colin Boyle, the department's new permanent secretary, is aware that this meeting is taking place, and I will provide him with a readout. I want to thank you, Chair, and the committee for this opportunity to come along today. We are more than open to learning from the Council and drawing on your expertise and experience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maeve and Louise, for that very comprehensive presentation. And, you know, it can't be understated how important arts and culture is to this city and district, and takes up a lot of the work of this committee and indeed the council as a whole. So it's very useful to hear from you today and get a chance to put questions, and you have greatly identified that equity funding is an issue that's likely to be raised by members. So we'll move on to questions here now. I have one indicated speaker here in the chamber, and if anyone else wishes to ask a question or make a comment, please put your name in the chat. So, Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Maeve and Louise, for coming here today. And from our perspective, the main focus is addressing regional inequalities and understanding the remit of this forthcoming culture, arts and heritage strategy. And I'm going to just get straight into it. In 2021, the Arts Council distributed funding to organisations and individuals based in Belfast to the tune of nearly £19 million. That same year, the organisations across our city and district got £1.7 million. So for every pound invested across Derry and Strabane, nearly £11 was invested in Belfast. And, you know, that's not fair, that's not balanced, that's not in the vicinity of being fair or balanced. And from our perspective, the funding system is broken and it needs fixed. As you've alluded to, Maeve, you know, Derry was the first city of culture. We're the second city in the north. The funding system that we currently have is unacceptable and unsustainable. So that's my opening gambit. But there's a couple of questions that I want to ask. And the first one is about the co-delivery group that we have in this city and district, and it comprises members from across the arts and culture sector, council officers and councillors as well. The co-delivery group met the Minister, met the Arts Council, met senior officials within DFC, and they have developed a very, very comprehensive submission. We've got it here, 6 pages long. And it was sent to the Minister in December, and it has a raft of proposals that could address the inequalities that we face across this city and district. And I'm not going to detail them all because there's too many to mention. But for me and for us, there's 4 key ones on there that could help to address the neglect and the historic imbalance that this city and district has faced in terms of funding for our arts and culture sector. So the first one is that we want to see a senior official from the Arts Council appointed with a specific remit to address regional imbalance and strategic development. We want to see an Arts Council office opened in this city, and we want to see a ring-fenced regional development fund. And finally, we want government support for a regional arts festival based in this city and district. So that submission has been sent to the department before Christmas. So my first question would be, what's your assessment of that? Do you think that we're making valid arguments about how we address the problems that the sector faces here in the Northwest? And will any of those proposals make it into this forthcoming strategy for culture, arts and heritage? My second question is, if our proposals don't meet the grade, what proposals does the department have to right this historic wrong? Because, as I've said before, the current funding and the current support formula doesn't work for this city and district. So I would like to know, what is the department going to do on a tangible basis that's going to improve and support the arts and culture sector across this city and district? In terms of the actual strategy that's being developed, do we have timescales for that? Because we'd be keen to know when this document is going to be produced. I know there was a consultation in 2016 for arts and culture strategy between 2016 and 2026, and to my knowledge, it's never actually been produced. So I'd be keen to know the actual timescales, expected timescales for this very much needed document to be produced, and the actions contained within it to actually be enacted. My final question is, we're all aware that we have no government here at the minute. We're all aware that the ministers can't make any real decisions without an executive in place. So is the current state of flux at Stormont going to limit or impact this strategy when it's produced, or can it be rolled out without an executive to formally sign it off? And I want to touch on one final thing. We've discussed this at length on numerous occasions in this council chamber, and we had written to the minister back in August of last year. And the letter, there were a number of issues in it about developing the new strategy in consultation with the co-delivery group in this city and district, for the minister to confirm that the regional disparity actually exists and that it would be a specific aim in the new strategy. And we also called on the minister to instruct the Arts Council to realign its budgets to replicate the sub-regional approach pursued by the department. The response didn't touch on any of those things at all. The response basically says, we'll come and see you to talk about this forthcoming strategy. So I'd be keen to get your views on that, but we're not happy with the status quo. The people across this city and district aren't happy with the status quo. The arts and culture sector aren't happy with the status quo either. We've made a detailed submission with concrete proposals that would address the historic imbalance, address the historic neglect. We've given you feedback, we've given you suggestions. We want this taken on board, and we want firm, measurable actions to come out of this. So I'd be keen to get your view on that, Maeve and Louise, but one final point, and you've already referenced that we're the first city of culture. It has been a long time, since 2013, and the 10th anniversary is coming up next year. So we look forward to engagement with DFC as a key partner to help us mark and celebrate that milestone. And your support would be vital, and your support would be most welcome. Thank you.
Okay, maybe Louise and Louise, there's a lot in there, but if you forgive me, there's a number of indicated speakers, and I'll probably take all those first, and then you can come in at the end, maybe to respond if that's okay. So the next indicated speaker is Councillor Logue.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Maeve and Louise, for your presentation today. I suppose a lot of what I was looking to say has already been said, but I just want to touch on a few things. Rajin from the Arts Council did present in May 2021, and to be honest with you, there was really no answers to the main questions that we had. I want to say that during the pandemic, the Department of Communities have directly helped a lot of arts organisations, and a lot of them would have went the wall without that direct help. And you mentioned yourself about how the arts impact on people's everyday lives, and that was evident in local communities during the pandemic. However, it is the main organisation who gets the lion's share for the distribution of the money, and that's the Arts Council, and it is there lies the problem. We've heard there has always been a regional imbalance regarding the money, and the evidence is there to back that up. We have our own local task force set up, and they have presented a document to yourselves. And I suppose without going over everything that the previous councillor has said, but it is imperative that an official from any arts, the Arts Council, and a sub-regional office is located in the northwest, preferably in the city. We need to ensure that the strategy includes that there will be a regional balance of money, and we need to ensure that the Arts Council adapt all their policies to ensure that this happens. It's good to hear that the rural and those groups of minorities are going to be targeted too as well. However, we need to have confidence in the strategy going forward, and in order to do that, we need to ensure that the regional imbalance that has been verified and acknowledged by the Minister is top of the list. Regarding the Arts Council and their remit, you went through a number of things, but it was in their remit to consult. Now, to be honest with you, it was very hard to get the Arts Council down to present to this council. And unless our council officers have anything to add regarding the consultation, I do not know how they are faring up with their responsibility to consult with other councils. I just want to say going forward, it is really, really imperative that we get this strategy up and running. I know that the previous councillor has asked a question regarding the Assembly not being up and running, but I feel because this work was instigated before the Minister, before the Assembly fell, that this work should go on and it shouldn't be hindered, and there should be a time scale put on this as a matter of urgency, so we can right all the wrongs that have been occurring regarding the Arts Council and how they have allocated the funding thus far. So again, just thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing more regarding the strategy. Thank you.
Okay, next indicated speakers, Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and can I welcome Maeve and Louise to the Chamber and hybrid meeting here. Welcome yous and welcome the presentation. You know, just listening to the presentation very, very clearly here, and you even said it yourself, Chair, we should never underestimate the importance of the arts and culture sector, and we do appreciate that importance down here. But once again, when it comes to funding, there is this regional imbalance. As one of the previous councillors said, 19 million Belfast, 1.9 million here in London area and in the surrounding areas. So, you know, to me, from the department end, it sends a message to me very clearly that maybe it's just not as important down here in the northwest than what it is in Belfast. And, you know, I would like a clear indication of maybe how that issue is going to be resolved. I do welcome the news that, you know, we have rural and minority groups in there now in the discussion. And, you know, we do believe that the creative industry is one of our big initiatives here in the city and wider council area, you know, through the arts and culture. And yes, they're right. These types of initiatives are the initiatives that fills our hotels, our bed and breakfast, and other venues. I do agree that we should have a designated officer to deal with the imbalance and the issue about an office being down here in the northwest. I do agree with that, and yes, I take on board the issue in around the first city of culture, and it's hard to believe. It'll soon be a decade since we had that and the high that we went through there. And we do hope as next year that there will be support for celebrating the 10th anniversary of hosting this wonderful, wonderful event. But look, it's all about finance. And I do appreciate, put on record our parties, you know, comments in around during the COVID, and we appreciate the funding that became available because a lot of these groups and organisations would not have been able to be sustained only for the help from the department. But Chair, those are the only questions I have, just as in around, you know, how to address the imbalance and the funding crisis and help us going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Morris. We just have two further indicated speakers, so if you don't mind, I'll take those and then we'll go back to yourself, Maeve. So, Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Maeve and Louise, for joining us here today and giving the presentation. And as you said, next year will mark a decade from our hosting of the City of Culture, and back then we were told that City of Culture and the investment that came with it would be transformative for the city, and indeed many of the big parties promised that it would transform things. That didn't materialise, and it didn't materialise 5 years ago when it was assessed, and it certainly hasn't materialised today. Unfortunately, the Derry and Strabane district, as you probably know, has the fourth lowest wages in the UK, has pre-pandemic 30% of its people living below the poverty line and who are being disproportionately impacted now by the cost of living crisis. Our rail and infrastructure is still way, way behind where it should be. There's been no real strategy for jobs investment and living wage jobs investment. So a lot of that hope around the City of Culture wasn't delivered on and was very superficial, and it certainly wasn't the vast majority of people who benefited from it. And so you know, that is a concern as we reach the 10th the 10th anniversary. So the first question I would have would be, in terms of going forward, what is the plan to ensure that there is real investment to see real transformation of the city and greater district as a result of the from the point of view of the DFC? The second thing is, as others have mentioned, I mean, there was a sustained campaign by the arts and culture sector here in the city and across the district, backed up by councillors and backed up by political parties, but very much led grassroots from the workers in that sector and the people who are invested in it, to basically win the Arts Council and indeed the DFC minister. They agree that there are structural imbalances in terms of funding, and I think that these are well proven now with the numbers that others have used and that have been cited in many reports. But it's one thing to get the Arts Council and the DFC minister to agree that this is true, that there has been decades of structural disinvestment or structural inequality when it comes to funding our arts and culture sector. But the question is, what is going to be done now about it? Are you here to tell us that there is a plan to address that, and not just to address it for the year for coming forward, but to address it in terms of the legacy issues? So I suppose those would be the main points that I would want to raise, and those are the two questions as well that I would pose to you. But thank you for being here today.
Okay, thanks, Sean. So finally, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee and appreciate the opportunity. Thanks to Maeve and Louise for their presentation. Indeed, as you've rightly pointed out, a lot of the questions and concerns have already been aired. However, reference has been made to regional imbalance, and members will not be unfamiliar with my concern of an internal district imbalance in the distribution of funds when we receive them. So in that light, I do welcome what has been said that minority groups, and within that is included rural groups, are receiving greater consideration. And I wonder when this targeting is formulated, will that funding be ring-fenced when it comes to this district council for distribution? I think that's an important feature, because whilst we complain of regional imbalance, we have to be aware of the imbalance that exists within our own district. Indeed, to exemplify that, the issue of an office in the Northwest, the only mention is that office should be in the city. Why does it have to be in the city? It comes to the Northwest, it can be anywhere within the area, and that would include our smaller towns and indeed the likes of an urban settlement such as Strabane, which is fairly central within our overall district. So those are just a couple of points I wanted to raise, Chair, and as I say, they not be unfamiliar, the tone of them, to members of committee and indeed members of council. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Derek. Okay, Maeve, I know there was a lot there, but I appreciate now if you'd come back and respond to some of those questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I was scribbling furiously as questions were being asked. I hope I've captured them. If we might begin with the questions that Councillor Farrell posed. And I think, Councillor Farrell, your first question was what I thought of the proposals that had been set out in the paper that was submitted by the co-design group. And, you know, I think as much as I can say on that, Councillor Farrell, is to say none of you have left us in any doubt today about the strength of feeling behind this matter of funding allocation patterns. We have heard it loud and clear. So what I think about it is neither here nor there, insofar as what I am saying to you is I understand why the questions are being raised, and I understand the intensity with which they're being raised. I've heard that very, very clearly, and I will make sure that they are fed back in terms of the development of the strategy. You've asked, Councillor Farrell, for a timeline. Do we have a timeline yet on it? And the answer is no. It would be premature of me to set out an exact timescale. What we say as a general observation about the development of strategies is in the department is somewhere between 12 and 18 months, and that's to allow for co-design, for proper consultations across departments and with the whole range of stakeholders that rightly need to be part of the development of this one. And that is a process that takes time. But I would say that it's very much in the department's interests to get this done and get it done quickly. And you know, we like to think, had it not been for the pandemic, it would have been done. But we had to really stop and redirect activities towards practical support for organisations and individuals and freelancers through the pandemic. And so be in no doubt that, you know, this has been approached as something that needs to be done and needs to be done as quickly as possible. I'd said at the outset of the meeting, Councillor Farrell, that we are more than happy to come back to you. And you know, once we have a time scale, I've said the individual who's leading it is starting next week. I'd say, you know, give them a bit of time to think about how long this is going to take and to be able to get critical milestones worked out for that. But you know, we would have every intention of working closely with you through that. Nothing is wasted in the proposals that you have made, and indeed all of them will be taken and reflected on. And the question was asked, I think, at a later point, Councillor Harkin, you know, when you asked about, you know, was I going to tell you that there was something concrete being put in place to deal with structural inequalities? Chair, I read earlier an extract from the report of the task force that was really, really clear on what the strategy needs to do by looking at funding allocations and looking at the equity or otherwise of them. The Minister signed off on the task force report, and whilst the terms of reference for the strategy are not yet firmly cast, there is every intention to make sure that that is part and parcel of the strategy considerations. Chair, on the specifics of the Arts Council opening an office in the Northwest or directing the Arts Council to allocate to the Northwest, I think this would not be the time for me to comment on that, other than to say I'll make sure that those are conversations that I have with the Arts Council. I've welcomed, Chair, the comments that were made acknowledging the work that was done through COVID in supporting the sector, and it would be really remiss of me to take the credit for that in the department, because we're not in any doubt we couldn't have done it. It couldn't have been done without many others, including staff and councils, including the Arts Council, who really had to stretch themselves and their staff in that time to administer, you know, sizably more funds than they would otherwise have been doing. And we met all the way through it, whether it was with musicians or their representatives, dance groups, whoever it was, commercial organisations, all of them made time to help us to design the kind of interventions that we know were helpful. The question was asked of me about the department's broadly investment plans in the Northwest. I'm not in a position, Councillor Harkin, to respond to the totality of the department's work in the Northwest, but if it would be helpful, I will make sure that something is commissioned to respond to that. And I think in that regard, our Northwest Development Office, I imagine, would have a big part to play in it, if that would be helpful. Chair, I hope I haven't, if I have missed on anything or not done justice to any of those important points that were made, forgive me for it.
No, Maeve, that's fine. Listen, thank you very much for that. Just leaves for me to thank you again for making a presentation and from hearing the questions and points made by members. So thanks for that. So I think you can sign off from the meeting now. We'll continue on, but thanks again from everyone here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Okay, members, moving on to Chairperson's business. A couple of brief items. I just realised not that long ago, this will be my last committee as chair for this year before the AGM. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the officers for all their help and comprehensive reports, and to thank members for their cooperation and their sort of diligence in getting the business of this committee done professionally and well. So I want to wish well whoever comes into the position of chair after the AGM, and I'm sure they'll do a good job. So that's just wanted to make that couple of remarks. I was contacted by Councillor Jason Barr, and it was after the deadline, to be fair, but given that Councillor Barr has never approached before about raising any issues under this item, I'm going to allow it. So, Councillor Barr, if you want to raise your issue now. Councillor Barr, are you online or on speaker? You can see him on the screen here, but I don't know if you're having technical issues, Councillor Barr, but I'll give it another minute, and unfortunately we'll have to move on. Okay, sorry, we'll have to move on. I'm sure there's another place that whatever issue was that Councillor Barr wanted to raise, you can.
Chair, just before we move on, could I just, on behalf of our party, thank yourself and all the council officers and all the team in the Business and Culture Department for their work this year. You've been a very fair chair, and everybody has worked under very difficult circumstances. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that.
And Chair, just from the DEP, from myself on the committee, thank you for the way you've handled the meetings, yes, through some very difficult times. And look, well done.
Thanks. Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, it's also on behalf of the SDLP, want to echo the sentiments of Councillor Logan, Alderman Devane. I think you've been a fair chair, a professional chair, and you managed the meetings very well. So thanks for your efforts over the past year.
Okay, thanks for all those.
Chair, with your permission, sorry, I'm not a member of the committee, but on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party, I would echo the sentiments that have already been expressed. We're diametrically opposed constitutionally, but I do have to raise the way you have chaired the ongoing meetings of this committee. I've certainly appreciated it as a non-member of the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Derek.
It's Sean here. So yeah, like you've been a very good chair. I'll give you that, and thanks for being a fair chair as well. And you know, if I get the chair in the future, I'll be open to model it on the way you've done it. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks, folks. I'm getting the red face here. So I'm informed that Councillor Barr is now able to come in. So just before we move on, then, if you want to come in now, Councillor Barr, and the issue you raised with me.
Chair, maybe I'm badly mistaken, or my memory's totally left me. What issue was that I raised with you, Chair? Because I don't know, maybe it was a long couple of weeks in them doors and elections, but I'm baffled here. I'm trying to think what I've raised.
Excuse me, Chair, I think it was myself.
Aye, I was thinking that.
Apologies, I got the wrong Councillor Barr.
But
so
just before I let you be on, Councillor Barr, I just want to say on behalf of myself, as also I served under you as deputy chair for the year, and you gave me very little to do, which was somewhat great in a way. But thanks a million. You were a brilliant chair. Cheers, Connor. Thank you.
okay, thanks, Jason. Sorry, go ahead, Raymond. My mistake.
Before I start too, Chair, I would just like to reiterate what everyone else has just said. You have a brilliant year as chair, and well done. Just a quick word on the retail park in Strabane. Staff employed the retail park in Strabane have been told the 4 stores operating there will close in July. New Look and Manaris are not relocating in the town, while Argus and Peacocks are non-committal. At the moment, staff in the stores are understandably angry and anxious about what the future holds for them. And they're also angry at the fact that despite Lidl announcing in 2018 and plan to relocate to the retail park, nothing was done to try and persuade these stores to stay. Council, who invest in LA, have passed the buck to, stayed silent. The bids stayed silent. The planning application was successful without question. The obvious consequence of what the outcome for these employees would be. I wrote to all 4 stores 18 months ago, and Newlook was the only store to reply. They actually said that they had no intention of closing their Strabane, saying it was one of their better performers. The plan for the new store of Lidl's was announced as a good news story for Strabane, with the creation of 10 new jobs. In reality, we're now faced with the closure of 2 shops, with a loss of 30 jobs, and the possibility of 2 more closing, with a loss of 20 plus more jobs. I feel we need to act. Council needs to act. We have heard, but only become aware of what was happening last week, and if that's the case, something's not right there. We need to be set up an action group or working group to try and salvage these jobs. The committee and the bids group need to be taking the lead and trying to ensure these businesses stay in Strabane. A jobs loss of 50 plus jobs is a disaster for any small town, but for Strabane it's catastrophic. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Okay, that ends that item, Chairperson's business, and moves us to item 7. As the minutes have already gone through full council, I don't need to be proposed and seconded, but there's an opportunity now if anyone has any matters arising from those minutes to indicate now. Councillor Hussey, or sorry, Alderman Hussey, my mistake. Go
Don't
ahead.
worry with that, Chair. Chair, for different reasons, I wasn't able to be at full council yesterday, but I would have raised these issues then under matters arising, but I see this as an opportunity. BC 64 on pages 3 and 4. There's a section there. I can get it up on my own screen here. That's where the guide to the rural markets. And in the second last, at the end of the second last paragraph, it states the officer's projections for the year going forward, and if there was sufficient demand and financial ability. There has been a Castleberg event meeting with local event organisers, with local traders, etc. And I can assure this committee that there is a demand in the area for markets, and indeed markets associated with other events such as Dairy Fest, the Apple Fair, etc. And then the issue comes along of financial viability. Now, I'm sure that officers from another department will be raising this at planning meetings going forward under departmental. And I trust that the Business and Culture Department will take on board the events meeting that has taken place and the need for coordination between departments to enable events and associated markets to be financed as we move forward. And there are some which are fairly close coming in towards the end of July. So I trust that officers are taking that on board, Chair. Do you want me to stop at that or move on to 65?
I move on to 65 now, Derek.
Appreciate that, Chair. Again, in the minutes, again, if I can find it. Two issues within that, and that is the health and safety and capital repairs lists. And I note in the minutes, this is to do with off-street car parking, by the way, Chair. I note that the issues around that have now been resolved. Scopes of work were being carried out, have to be progressed as soon as possible, given these items are on the health and safety repairs list. And the director has assured that a timeline will be coming forward. How close are we to receiving that timeline? And the second one within that is the last paragraph of the Garden Newton Stewart, where it's hoped that a proper meeting with traders will take place rather than informal chats, which have been the norm to date. Is there any indication as to when officers will formally meet with the traders grouping in Newton Stewart to discuss that issue? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any officers want to respond before I move on to Councillor Harkin's matter? So go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm happy to take the car park one. In terms of the timetable, I don't have that yet, Alderman Hussey, because I've just, with Easter and one thing and holidays, I haven't been able to tie down the meeting with Capital and with the property, but that is happening next week, so I'll know then what the timetable is, and I can let you know. In terms of a meeting with the traders, we have a meeting timetable for this Thursday where myself, Karen Phillips, Chief Executive, and a number of other officers are meeting with a number of the traders to discuss their issues.
Thank you, Chair. That's excellent. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just to mention that I had attended the unveiling of the 9th plaque put up at the Star Factory by Friends of the Factory and the Dairy Trades Union Council, commemorating the contribution of our shirt factory workers. And it was just a brilliant event with so many shirt factory workers in attendance, speaking about, you know, their lives in the factories and what it meant to them to have these physical commemorations now around the city. And I want to thank the council officers who worked with the Friends of the Factories and the Trades Councils as well to help facilitate that. And the factory horn went off at 2 o'clock on the Saturday as well. So it was a brilliant event. And I think it's just brilliant now, no matter what happens, you know, with sculptures and stuff like that. There is a real physical commemoration now that is on factory after factory right across the city on both sides of the bridge, and more are going to go up that properly commemorate the contribution of shirt factories throughout the shirt factory workers throughout the years. And I would encourage you know, councillors and anybody else really to go and have a look at them plaques. There's a walking tour now, or a couple of different walking tours that have been organised. And if I could also encourage council officers to look at ways for us to help promote those plaques. I think they're fantastic for people in the city to know about, and people in the right across the district to know about, but also for anybody that's visiting to really understand, you know, the importance of the shirt factory workers in the city, and you know, that it's now a living legacy and it's up there forever. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Okay, that's, no one else has indicated raising any further matters, so that moves us off that item and on to item 8, which is the first of our matters for decision. Sorry, I just couldn't get that out. So who's taking this paper? Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, members, the first item is our annual service plan for 2022-23. As members will be aware, every year we seek approval for a service plan, which is really the outworkings from the strategic growth plan for each department for the incoming financial year. It also updates members on the progress to date within the directorate, the targets, etc., and working within obviously the rates allocation that has been there. So members will be aware this is a statutory performance improvement regime. We have to put this in front of yourselves. Obviously, there's a very specified format there also. I'm not going to go through all 100 odd pages of the targets and etc. I'm sure everybody read it thoroughly. But clearly we're able to take any comments from members, any questions, queries. I don't expect everything to go through today per se, but obviously any queries or updates that require between now and council meeting, we're happy to take those. I'm also proposing that on the back of this, and we did this before in previous years where we had a half day, we brought the senior officers who are responsible for direct delivery of these programs. And we did a workshop type environment where members get a bit more of an opportunity to probe in depth, talk to the team and put faces to the names as well, which I think is important. So we'll work with committee section to get an appropriate date for that. and we'll hopefully do it probably in June will be the best bet when the new committee is there, and go through that in detail. So today, members, as I say, although we're seeking a approval for it as such, it's really just the format and everything that's there. But we're happy to take any questions, queries between now and the council meeting if we need to change it. And just to note as well that there will be a workshop for all members of Business and Culture, but it'll also be open to the wider membership of council, which I think is a useful exercise to go through with the officers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. And I think Alderman Hussey's question was answered in the final section of that. So if no members have any questions or comments for Stephen, I'll just ask for a proposer and seconder for the item.
Proposed, Alderman Devaney.
Okay, and it's been seconded here in the room by Councillor Farrell. So that's that item dealt with. Moves us on to item 9. Whoever's dealing with that, Kevin.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the purpose of this report is to provide you with an update on activities delivered by the Investment Service and outline the development programme for 2022 and seek your endorsement on the proposed schedule of activities. I think it's worth noting, just before I go into this paper, around what we would have been doing prior to the pandemic and what we're hopefully getting back to doing now, sort of as we move into a sense of normality. Clearly, in previous years, we would have had a fairly well-oiled machine in terms of how we went out there to target from an international perspective, but also from a national and all-island perspective in terms of how we marketed the place from an investment perspective. We had developed a fairly strategic set of activities, and our teams were well honed at how they delivered our pitch, our proposition, and all that. So obviously the pandemic didn't allow us really to go out into international markets. Everything was turned pretty much virtual. A lot of the activities that we did, we just couldn't do in that period. So we're getting back to doing that. So as we present these plans to members, they will hopefully augment and change and evolve, because our markets are also starting to respond back to us now. There was a tentativeness in terms of attending in-person meetings as we try to plan for events for this quarter, but I think by the autumn, hopefully we'll be in a good position in terms of actually really going proactively. So the investment service itself, basically, its kind of mandate, it's what it works to is through the primary outcome that we prosper through a strong, sustainable and competitive economy, maximising job creation, investment opportunities in our city and town centres, building and strengthening clusters of industry specialism. So that involves us assisting other bodies, other organisations, stakeholders, the business community, the chambers of commerce, to really develop a compelling international investment proposition. So during that period, towards the end of last year and the first quarter of this year, we've obviously run a number of campaigns. We really focused on the Come Home to Us, which was really trying to play on the fact that people had the opportunity now to come back to live within the city region, within Derry City and Strabane District Council in the wider northwest, and work for companies all around the world. We feel that was a really strong campaign, and we got some great metrics out of that in terms of engagement and some leads that we've obviously followed up on. Companies have responded to us too and have had specific asks of us. We've been involved in assisting companies with the recruitment campaigns, marketing the fact that they're in the region, marketing the fact that they're recruiting right across Derry City and Strabane, companies that weren't maybe typically recruiting here. The report highlights a number of those: Almac in the life and health sciences, AquaQ Analytics in terms of AI and data science, the new entrant to Derry City and Strabane Challenge Curve, version 1, who are Belfast-based but promoting or recruiting here locally, and then the Hinduja Global Solutions, which are also doing the same. So we've assisted those companies with their recruitment campaigns and try to help them raise their profile. We've also in this time taken the opportunity to revisit how we work across the northwest region on a cross-border basis. and through the work of the Northwest Development Partnership have developed a cross-border inward investment strategy. OCO Global have helped us develop that, and it's really assisting us to focus on our strongest sectors, aligning it to the City Deal and Inclusive Future Fund investments here in the Derry and Strabane area, and also the strengths within County Donegal and actually wider afield. Looking at what the establishment of the Atlantic Technical University will mean on the Donegal side, and how they can work together to really build on the talent pipeline. So in terms of how we go out and market that across the island, but also across the world, we actually did run a fairly, in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, a fairly successful event in Belfast in November. We ran the annual Golden Bridges conference virtually in November, probably to varying degrees of success given that it was virtual. The face-to-face is important in this world, and trying to promote and attract investment into the region. We have worked in partnership with Belfast City Council and ran a FinTech event in the City of London on the 8th of March. And we also work with the FCDO and the British and Irish embassies on the Joining the Dots event, which happened towards the end of March in Dublin, involving the cities across Ireland and the city regions within England. So just in terms of what's planned, we have the Investors Forum, which will be coming up. We are working on a Innovators Festival, which is happening next week, 19th to 21st of May in Gweedore in County Donegal. We're planning to run a Ireland Northwest promotional event in Dublin in the autumn, and also a further Derry City and Strabane District investment promotion event in the City of London, also in the autumn. And then moving on then to the US engagement in Philadelphia and Boston from the 14th to the 18th of November. Clearly, each of those events will merit separate reports which will come back in relation to their targets, in relation to the indicators and success measures which we'll hope to deliver across those. So the recommendation is to seek your endorsement on the proposed schedule of events this year.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Councillor Logan indicated here in the chamber, just would like to comment on that. So go ahead, Tricia.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kevin, for the report. And we want to welcome the companies to the city thus far, but it is very important, and we really need to state this, that we need the executive to be established so that we can develop a sub-regional strategy for the Northwest to ensure that work can be done with both councils in partnership, and that a new relationship can be developed between Invest NI and IDA. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, happy to second, and I wouldn't normally say this, but I agree with Councillor Logue. We need to see movement at the executive. We need to see an economy minister appointed. We need to see a massive change in attitude from Invest NI, and I would like to personally thank Kevin for the time and effort that he took in submitting our response to the independent review of Invest NI, because I think that's critical. You know, we as a council can only do so much in terms of promoting this city and region. I think that needs to be matched by Invest NI. But I've got one question. In terms of these events that we are planning, you know, these trade delegations, etc., is that all council funded, or do we get any funding from Invest NI towards that? Thank you.
Okay, you want to respond to that, Kevin? And then I'll conclude. Go ahead.
Yeah, so on the trade side, Invest NI will support companies to travel up to 50%. So they do provide funding for the trade side. They will assist us with on market and put on showcase events on the cross-border basis. Obviously, we work with Donegal County Council and have funded them in the past through the Northwest Development Fund. So that clearly has been Northwest Development Fund. We, as a council, we do provide budget in relation to the investment promotion, and that will be funded through us, through the business and culture budgets. So there's a mix there, Councillor Farrell, in terms of depending on what the nature of the visit is, and they all are quite separate, but they would have funded the Succeed Northwest event, and they will provide match funding for some of the events that we would put on in Boston, and in partnership with them in the past. So we're in a new environment now, but in terms of, we haven't been there in a couple of years, and we're starting a wee bit putting it, as a clean slate in terms of how we plan these types of engagements. The world's moved on too, so we'll see how we pan out in discussions over the next couple of months.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I just wanted to check, Councillor Lowe, did you propose that item? I know Councillor Farrell seconded it.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, okay.
And can I just say, look, I have to go now, so I have another meeting at 6 and meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. Okay, that's that item dealt with. As per the norm, the next range of items are all for information, and I'm going to take them as a block. And if anyone wishes to speak or ask a question on any of those items, please indicate now in the chat box or here in the room. So give it a second. Okay, no one has indicated. So that concludes a final meeting of the Business and Culture Committee for this month. So we thank everybody and hope you have a good evening.